Oh, hello, David. Welcome to the show. I'm so glad that you're here.
It's great to be talking to you today, Liz.
Yeah, like I said before we started, I was reading your book yesterday on the deck. It was a beautiful day, and it was kind of hard to read some of this data that you have put into this beautiful book, Raising Healthy Kids. But before we get into all of that, can you give our listening audience a bit of a bird's eye view about you and how the events in your life led you to the work you're doing now and this incredible book?
Well, um, my book is Raising Healthy Kids, Protecting Your Children from Hidden Chemical Toxins. And I was a victim of DDT poisoning when I was growing up. I fished a lot in California, in Los Angeles County, in the Santa Monica Bay. And unknown to me, a chemical company manufacturing DDT dumped 2,000 tons of their DDT waste sludge into the waters of the Santa Monica Bay where I fished, and all the fish became contaminated. When I was a bit older, I was an investigative reporter for a newspaper in Los Angeles called LA Weekly. And we did a study where we measured the blood levels of pesticides and DDT in the fishermen and women eating the locally caught fish. And we found that those who were eating the locally caught fish had much higher levels of pesticide and industrial chemical residue. And I had my own blood checked, and I also had very high levels when it dawned on me pretty clearly that I was poisoning myself because I was eating so much fish from the bay too, having grown up near the ocean and working on boats and things like that. I realized that I needed to learn more and change the way I was eating, or I'd become even more poisoned with pesticide. And that's when I wrote my first book, Diet for a Poisoned Planet. When I wrote that book, there was no organic market. I mean, these things didn't even exist. So I have seen how much progress we have made um, in the anti-toxic movement since that book, and it's really quite given everything against us who want to have healthy kids, it's really quite miraculous. I ended up detoxing and learning how to eat better and protect myself from chemical toxins. I formed in 2012 the Healthy Living Foundation. And well, I did that because as a journalist, I realized corporations don't get fazed by shame. You can't shame a corporation because it's not a human being. And I think there's a lot of human beings I've discovered since who don't feel a sense of shame either. However, what they do feel is a sense of loss in their pocketbook. And I formed the Healthy Living Foundation, and we began using the laws in California and other states like Washington, D.C., District of Columbia, to file legal actions against companies that were not disclosing their hidden chemical toxins in their foods and products. We immediately sued Procter and Gamble because their herbal essences and Pantene shampoos had high levels of a chemical carcinogen called dioxane. We won the legal action in court. We won a consent judgment. And today, those products which are still being sold have 90% less of the chemical carcinogen than they did have when we sued them. Now, it's really important. That was a big victory, but zero tolerance, mom and dad, zero tolerance.
Yeah.
You have to have zero tolerance for exposures. So we did a big thing, but I want you who are listening to have zero tolerance, no carcinogens. Anyway, I'm a reporter, a father of three, and that's kind of how I got into it, Liz, the short version.
I love that. I love that. And it was great to hear that, like your own discovery, your own self-education, doing your job as a reporter enlightened you to this massive issue that was just being swept underneath the rug. Let's just continue to make our money and the people don't need to know. It's not a big deal. They can't pin it on us. I mean, that must have been pretty shocking when you did peel back all of the layers and you did find out this truth. Were you angry in those moments, or were you just like, okay, I'm going to be logical about this. I'm going to take the steps necessary to tackle this head on? What were you feeling when you
Oh,
when you
that's
discovered the truth?
angry and logical, both. That's great.
Mhm.
I'm glad you encapsulated it that way. I'm still angry because, today we continue to file legal actions against companies that are selling products that are dangerous for our kids. We filed an action against an almond butter manufacturer the most popular brand, I think, in America. It's a public court case now, who know they are selling their almond butter with an industrial chemical called acrylamide that increases our daughter's risk for endometrial cancer.
Mm.
And I talk about it in my book, Raising Healthy Kids, the product. I tell you the safe products. I give you our test results. But, they're doing it knowingly. And it just burns me up. So, yeah, I still get angry. I'm also know that anger alone isn't enough, and you do have to be logical and think things through. And what I want people listening, your listeners, to know is there's a lot of chemical toxins in our life. They're called, they're everywhere chemicals, forever chemicals that last seemingly forever and that seem to show up everywhere. It may seem like an unmanageable problem, but it's not. You know, um, I wrote Raising Healthy Kids kind of as a protective shield, like taking a course in karate where you become a black belt, only now you're becoming a black belt in protection against chemical toxins. It is manageable, and we are making a difference societally too. But for mom and dad, this is so vital because the chemicals we're talking about, like the phthalates in the cosmetics mom may be using during pregnancy, these are shown in scientific studies to shave 5 to 6 to 7 IQ points off your child
Mm.
before they're even born. So these chemicals are literally robbing them of their future. And that's why it's so important to everyone to know about this. You're right, it was swept under the rug, or it was rather not well known.
Mhm.
This is such a young movement. We didn't even begin until Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring in 1962. Until then, we didn't even have a vocabulary, Liz, to talk about what we're talking about today. Words like endocrine disruption or cancer risk. These were no one thought like that through the 70s, through the eight. These risks really didn't become paramount until the 90s.
Right.
We've made a lot of progress, but it's a very young movement, the anti-toxic movement.
I mean, with everything that we know now, I mean, you've had these lawsuits out, you've had HLF out now for a minute. Why does it seem like there's more and more companies coming out with new products that are still loaded down with all of these really debilitating chemicals that are going to be causing cancer in 10 years, 15 years time? And why is this happening? And then you go to Europe or other places and they're so much cleaner and there's so many more regulations. Like, why is there such a dearth of regulations and care in the United States?
Well, in truth, when we pass legislation, anti-toxic legislation in the United States, a lot of it is designed to look like we're doing something, like we're making a big progress, but it's really a big kabuki dance where there's a lot of commotion, and in the end, everything is almost the same. That's because, um, you know, I deal with the state government particularly all the time, and they're just not as zealous. Listen, I'm a big believer in government and institutions. I do believe we need public servants, and most of them are great people and really trying hard. But somehow when they're doing these legal actions, they're not really very strict. Number one, they kind of say, oh, we'll get a settlement because we can say we got a settlement. But in the end, it doesn't really accomplish a lot. Look, we have a Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act that was written in 1938, and it requires no pre-market safety testing for any cosmetic product.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right about the dearth of regulations. And on the other hand, we are coming out with more and more chemicals. Like, just for an example, the EPA, our Environmental Protection Agency, will say, okay, we're going to start to regulate these forever chemicals. And they name 6 specific chemicals. Do you know how many forever chemicals there are? There are 12,000. So if EPA is regulating 6, it's like, okay, industry comes up with a new one. They
Yeah.
tweak the one of the atoms, they add one more carbon atom. They make it shorter, longer as a chemical chain. They say it's less toxic because there are no studies on it. So they don't know. They're saying that. This is industry. There's no conscience there. And
Mm.
mom and dad, the federal government that you think, Uncle Sam, who you think is looking out for you, he's the last backstop. He's not the first protection. He's the last. And often that backstop, because of the way the laws are written, has so many loopholes that we're not being protected. That's why I say I believe in government, but more, I believe in you, mom and dad, to pick up the book, read it, and protect your kids.
I love that. I love that. I've always been a person that's like, I'm going to do my own research. I'm going to find out everything I can about this. I obsess about it. And then it's like, okay, I go on to the next thing. So for the person, the mom and the dad listening to this right now, what is something that they can start to pay attention to today? I know there's a lot that they need to read in this book and tackle. Is there some place where they should start at the very least to start protecting themselves and their kids?
Yes, yes, there is. Food. Food is the easiest way to start. And one of the big myths that I bust in raising healthy kids is that it's too expensive to buy organic foods and or that there's no difference between organic foods and conventionally sourced. One, um, 20 years ago, when there was no organic market, organic foods obviously were more expensive. It was just beginning. But now, because of so many great consumers who are conscientious, the markets have grown, and organic foods, you can buy all the staples now for the same price as conventionally sourced. I'm talking apples, oranges, lettuce, celery, carrots, potatoes, tomatoes. They're all the same price now because those of us who are buying organics have created these markets, and there's more and more a demand and more producers. So it's not more expensive. Those foods, I give you tips too on some foods that are more expensive, like some of the glamour fruits like blueberries, strawberries.
I
Those
didn't
are,
know that was a glamour fruit.
yeah, well, that's what they call them. What
Oh.
they actually are really that their outer coating is so soft and tender that they're
Mm,
very susceptible to fungi and insects. So they get sprayed a lot.
mm,
And being a gardener myself, I know how difficult it is to grow a healthy strawberry.
mm.
There's these little sow bugs that will attack you from the ground. There are birds that will pick at it from the top. So organic strawberries are a bit more expensive. But what you can do is, and I tell this to mom and dads all the time, go get yourself a 3-pound pack of frozen strawberries. They're the same price as conventionally sourced. Get your kids some non-fat yogurt. It can be organic or not organic. It would be better organic, but non-fat plain is good too. Non-fat yogurt, not organic. And you can give your kids wonderful, healthy desserts, no sugar, organic. And so you can find ways around any of the price increases. And I share that in the book. Being a shopper and an activist, I live on a budget and I have 3 kids. So I know what it's like to uh, look for bargains. But, food is the place to start. And that's because if you start with food, your kids will show improvements right away.
Mm.
People always ask me, well, if I make the changes that you're talking about in raising healthy kids, protecting your children from hidden chemical toxins, if I make these changes, how fast is it that I'll see results? Well, the results will come immediately because if you know a little bit about our bodies, we have what's called messenger RNA, and that takes in all the signals from the external environment and from our internal environment. Then it makes these little messages that tells the DNA what to do, and then the DNA tells our genes and our cells, uh, DNA gene cells, what to do. So we have all these cells and organs that are producing, for example, sex hormones, estrogen and testosterone. And our foods are loaded with fake estrogens, like,
Hmm.
and our cosmetics are too, but foods are loaded with various kinds of fake estrogens and pesticides called organophosphates that cause nerve damage. So your body will respond immediately and start producing healthier forms of estrogen. This was just shown in a study where the researchers had, this was for cosmetics, but they substituted paraben and phthalate-free cosmetics among users. And then they looked at their breast tissue. This was in women. And from the beginning of the study till the end, and all the breast tissue got healthier. The
Wow.
genes were producing healthier forms of estrogen. You see your daughters produce a toxic form of estrogen or a healthy form of estrogen. And if you put in foods like I was talking about that nut butter with acrylamide, and the name of the brand is in the book, avoid it when you learn it. Um, if if you keep eating, if your daughter keeps eating these nut butters, which are supposed to be healthy with acrylamide, acrylamide is like a little sex hormone, and it latches onto your daughter's cell receptors on her reproductive organs and her brain, and it starts to mess with the genes, and your daughter will start producing toxic forms of estrogen that last a long time and are much more carcinogenic. The
Mm.
safest forms of estrogen, like estriol, break down really fast in the body. They do their job and they go away. They don't, it's not like having, but the toxic forms are like having a computer virus that won't go away,
Mm.
and they keep latching onto the cells. They last longer, and they're telling the reproductive organs to produce certain forms of estrogen that are toxic. So you see the results right away internally, but you will also see it with your kids in the way they behave. For example, if you
Yeah.
have ADHD kids, and you take away and you start giving them healthier foods without these nerve toxins called the organophosphates, you'll see improvements in their behavior quite fast because the body responds really quickly. And the food there won't be these food dyes in there either. Now the food dyes are a big contributor to ADHD symptoms too.
100%.
Yeah, so you will see the results. So you start with food, and I talk about and I talk about this. This is how the book opens, is making your food choices. But it's not dry. I really kind of go into it by telling stories about my own kids and other kids and parents. And your choices, mom and dad, are so good for your family. But I tell this little story in Raising Healthy Kids. There's a town in California called Salinas, and it's called the lettuce bowl of America because about 70% of our nation's lettuces grow in there. Not to
Mm.
mention strawberries and other vegetables and fruits. But the town and all the schools are carved right into the farm fields. Here's this town, and then thousands and thousands of acres of farm fields. And then you'll be driving, and here's this little school in the middle of all these farm fields. When I used to visit Salinas, all these fields were being sprayed with those organophosphate pesticides I mentioned, Liz, like
Mm.
diazinon, chlorpyrifos. They were all being sprayed, and the kids are playing on the playgrounds on one side, the fields are on the other. Between them is only a chain link fence. I've been there, I've seen it. And these are the kinds of kids that will get ADHD or lose IQ points because they're breathing in this mist that's very toxic. So show you how your food choices, the listeners' food choices matter. When I returned to Salinas to write my new book, I went to the same schools I had visited previously. They were all surrounded by organic lettuce and strawberry fields. The
Ugh.
kids were playing, they were much healthier. There were no more toxic residues when they were out on the playground. And I called up one of the teachers whom I knew. No, I said, Oscar, what's going on here? And he said, well, it's because of consumers like you, David, who have been
Mm.
buying all these organic strawberries and this organic lettuce that created so much demand that the farmers here in Salinas are planting more and more organic fields to meet that demand, and the schools are benefiting. I was crying with joy because, Liz, for many years I would buy organic foods and have to listen to people who said they knew better tell me, there's
Mhm.
no difference in organic foods. It's just a waste of your money. Now, I saw those kids and I felt great because I knew my choices were not only helping my kids, but helping another community that's very important to me. It's these are my neighbors.
Right.
I may not know them, but I really want Americans to feel like you may not know the folks in the next city or in the rural areas of your state or town or region, but they're your neighbors too. They may have different views on certain things, but one thing we can share is we know these chemicals are harmful. We know we want all of our kids to be healthy. And we can, and our shopping choices are not only helping our kids, but I've seen it firsthand now. They're helping other kids.
Right.
And we need to do that as Americans because you know what? There aren't a lot of adults in Washington, D.C. I think that's where all uh, sadly, a lot of the brain damaged kids have gone because there ain't
Yeah.
a lot of good stuff coming out of there. So
Right.
it's up to you and me, Liz, and your listeners to just say, we're the adults. We're the ones who are going to take charge. We understand that our choices make a difference. And so I start with food. That's how I start. And that's how I think your listeners can start. And when you buy organic foods, they may say, well, okay, but what's the benefit to my kids? Here are the benefits. And these are peer-reviewed published studies. First of all, your kids will have less obesity. These are known reduced risk,
Right.
less diabetes, fewer allergies. Mom, if you're pregnant and on an organic diet, you'll have less pregnancy complications. And if you're on an organic diet and trying to get pregnancy, parents will like to know this too. Dad will have more healthy sperm. because men on organic diets just tend to have healthier sperm. Liz, you know we're going through a fertility crisis in
Yep.
America. We're not reproducing at a healthy rate. People keep going that, you know what they're trying to do? They're trying to blame it on women working.
Mm,
That's the blame. They say, well, so many women are working now, they're not having kids. No, no. Women, I don't want to speak for everyone or anyone. I just know that people tend to want to have kids. A lot of people want
hmm
to have kids. It's what really is happening here. You have to look at it neurobiologically. We're infusing this environment with so many xenoestrogens, fake estrogens that are attacking men's sperm and women's fertility, that our rates are going down because they're simply not able to reproduce. Our boys are being denied testosterone. I mentioned
Right.
those phthalates in cosmetics. That's a fake estrogen. And the studies show one after the other that for boys, they just don't have as much circulating testosterone. So that's why the studies show their gender behavior is modified. You
hmm
know, they start to behave more feminine because they don't have the testosterone.
That was a really fascinating part of your book that I'm so glad that you just touched on. Can you talk about even in vitro how these chemicals are affecting that testosterone level in our boys and our girls, and so it's changing their behavior years and years down the line? And then I don't know, you talk about it because you said it so well in the book, and I think that's something that's so on the cutting edge right now. Like people aren't really grasping that or even thinking that that's a real thing.
Well, a healthy baby starts before conception. I mean, everyone should know that. And I mean this for dad, for dad and mom, but if you're, when the embryo is developing, it's just a few cells. I mean, we for weeks and weeks and on end, the embryo, your little child is replicating cells at such a fast rate, and they're very sensitive to the sex hormones, like parts per trillion sensitive.
Wow.
So if all of a sudden when they're developing, you say mom is using she's going out for the night and she's using, or dad, well, let's say she's pregnant, so it's mom, and she's using a fragrance or a perfume, and it's loaded with these phthalates. She's giving her child, her developing embryo, a shot of all these sex hormones
Mm.
that are going to modify the genes. We talked about that.
hmm
They're going to hit the messenger RNA. The messenger RNA is going to say, oh, these are really toxic. Good, let's start producing toxic forms of estrogen now. The messenger RNA is agnostic. It just takes messages, right? If
Right.
you fill it up with good messages, it says good things. If you fill it up with toxins, it tells the body bad things. It's just
Mm.
agnostic. You have to tell it what to do. So all of a sudden, you're robbing your embryo of the ability to create the foundation for producing healthy sex hormones or just being developing properly. As the embryo develops into a fetus, first the genitalia develop. Now, sex, the two biggest sex organs in the human body are the genitalia. And I always ask people, what's the second one? They never get it, but it's the human brain.
Okay, good. I was
The
thinking
human
that.
brain.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
yeah. I know you don't have to go anywhere else. It's the human brain.
Um,
Both the genitalia and the human brain and the breasts in women particularly depend on the sex hormones and to develop. The brain will develop towards a masculine or towards a feminine depending on its input of sex hormones.
wow.
Now, these develop though at different times. So say early on in the pregnancy, um, uh, things are kind of going along normal. Then in 3 or 4 months, mom uses that fragrance again. But this time the brain is developing with all those phthalates and other xenoestrogens impacting this burst of sex hormones going to the brain. The brain is going to start to develop less in the masculine way and more in the feminine way. Whereas the
Wow.
genitalia are developing maybe normally in the masculine way. So this has been published. These are published peer-reviewed studies from the Netherlands. What they find is that because of this is kind of how we get to the issue of a transgender.
Mm,
It doesn't explain everything, but scientists looking for an explanation, this is the one that is now accepted as the basis. So your child may develop physically with male genitalia, but the brain may develop more towards the feminine.
Hmm.
And this can cause a dysphoria later as the child develops. Because remember, once, you can change this in pregnancy by eating healthy foods, going organic. But if you are loading your child up with all these sex hormones, they're going to keep on producing more feminine, bad estrogen, even in their puberty, because
Yeah.
these things are really set up during pregnancy. Puberty unlocks what has already been set up during pregnancy.
Wow.
So your child will start to develop and have a dysphoria. That means they may be thinking, gee, I kind of identify more feminine, but I have these masculine genitalia. And that's kind of one of the explanations, not all of it, but it's just a way for mom and dad to kind of understand the profound influence that your habits during pregnancy can have on your child's ability to develop fully into male or female, or even produce adequate sex hormones to be fertile as an adult and have kids and make you the grandparent that eventually, as you get older, mom and dad, you may not want to be a grandparent when you're in your 40s or 50s, but at some point you're going to say, hey, I would like my kids to have kids and I want them to be healthy. We all go through that. I'm a parent, you
Yeah.
know. I don't want to be called a granddad, but you do want your kids to have those healthy.
Yeah. Well, and I think what I'm getting from this is it's not, okay, you might have messed up in pregnancy. I had my first 12 years ago, and it's like, okay, well, I hope I did everything right. Is it too late, for them to go clean and to start producing healthy sex hormones? I feel like it's never too late if they're still if you can get them on the right track and
Yeah,
mitigate
you're
these
absolutely
exposure.
right. Yeah, yeah. It's
Okay.
not too late. It's not too late. It's not too late for adults or for kids.
Okay.
And that's really an important, as I said, the body responds immediately. You can always improve your health. So, if you've had a child and you're going to have another child, do this now. And
Mm-hmm.
by the way, um, this is affecting all of us. So, maybe, there's a lot of what we call gender fluidity in society today, where kids are kind of, male, female, and something in between. Um, and, but this isn't just happening to our kids. If you wonder kind of why is our morality changing, you can say it's enlightenment, which it is, I think, because I think we should be accepting of everyone, of all life. But it's also changing we're all under this influence. Even a guy who's 60 years old, his brain is being influenced by these
Mm-hmm.
xenoestrogens. So our morality is changing because our brains, the way we think, is literally changing from a neurobiological basis. So, this is like the sea washing away the earth. It's not something you're going to stop. And
Mm,
you shouldn't listen, um, when your kids come home and they say, maybe I identify this way or I want to dress that way, the first thing I want to tell mom and dad, because this is happening more and more,
mm-hmm.
love first, always love first, educate later. Your kids will educate you, but love first. And just try to understand it's not just your kid, it's all of us. We've dumped so many trillions of doses of these xenoestrogens into our environment. We've always developed in relation to our environment.
Right.
The difference is that today we're developing in relation to our environment that has so many of these little fake estrogens that we're being exposed to. So don't judge your kids if they are not purely masculine, like a John Wayne or something, whatever it is today. You
Yeah.
know,
Because they're not the
that's
same.
not society today. We've changed everyone with all of these xenoestrogens. And Liz, government isn't really doing anything about it, but you can do something as a parent. You can protect your parent, and we are making changes. Again, just understand everything we're talking about. This is so new.
Yeah.
Like I said, the whole movement didn't even begin until the 60s. No one had, and that was just for a few people. The widespread understanding of how chemical toxins are impacting our kids and us as adults, that's only like 20 years old, 25 years old. So
Right.
people are just catching on.
Well, that's why I love having people like you on the show to espouse all of this wisdom, everything that you've studied and compiled over the years. I mean, this is gold to people, and I'm so glad that not just people in the United States, but parents all over the world tune into the show and they're hearing it and they're getting it. And one thing I did want to touch on that you touched on in the book is sometimes you're in situations where they're at work or you're at school and you can't really control the environment. You are subject to the environment. If there's asbestos, if there's like mold, whatever it is, how can kids and adults detox, deal with this when you're in a situation that's kind of outside of your control?
Those are great questions. Work, I actually have a chapter on school, the new school rules. So when you're sending your kids to school, you can control a lot of it. One big tip and there's other tips, but one big tip from the book, Mom and Dad, before your kids' first day of school, test the drinking water. What's coming
Mm.
out of the tap at school? I tell the story of folks, and they could have controlled this, but they didn't know. So they were sending their kids off to preschool in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. The preschool was located on the former Air Force Base, Pease Air Force Base, where so much firefighting foam had been used, firefighting equipment,
Mm.
that the everywhere chemicals, what are called forever chemicals or everywhere chemicals, these are forever chemicals. They got in all the wells.
Mm.
One of the wells that was providing water for the preschool, but they didn't check the water. And when they found out a year later, their kids had very high levels of forever chemicals that can cause cancer, kidney disease, that are estrogenic. The guilt is just going to be there forever. It's going to be there forever. So I want parents to know these big tips so they can protect themselves and their kids. Check your kids' water. Don't take it for granted that the school is looking out for you. Okay? They're not, and bad things can happen. And I go into asbestos and PCBs and other things too, and I share examples from other schools and how to deal with it. But if you're at work, you must listen. There are some jobs my nonprofit does a lot of work in Cancer Alley, Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
And if say you're working um, at a neoprene plant, like you've got I hate to say this, but the exposure is so pervasive. There's some jobs that are so bad that you have to leave them if you want to have healthy kids and be healthy yourself. For most of us, another example, firefighters. Um, all their protective equipment. I was a call firefighter for a number of years, a volunteer call firefighter. And The equipment that is used by firefighters is loaded with these forever chemicals.
I
So they
didn't know
have real
that.
fertility issues, cancer issues, testosterone issues. A lot of firefighters are on testosterone replacement. And the reason why they're on it is because of these forever chemicals. They absorb them.
Wow.
They absorb them. I mean, the studies have been done. And
Wow.
so their clothing uh, is the protective clothing slowly is being changed so that the forever chemicals are not being used. But it's a real issue in some jobs. In many jobs, what you need to do though is there are just simpler things that you can do for most jobs. If you work in an office, there are lots of things you can do. For example, um, you should have air purifier. And if you do if you do work, say you work in a manufacturing facility, but you're an office worker, you should have a HEPA, high efficiency
Mm-hmm.
particulate air filter in your office. The studies show, and by the way, if you live in a polluted area, if you're pregnant, you need to have one in your home because the studies show that when your child developing fetus is exposed to the air pollution, um, they lose IQ points that way too.
Mm.
But studies also show that when you filter your air and reduce those particulates, that your child will be born with higher IQ compared to those who didn't filter their air.
Wow.
So, filtering your air in the office is really important. You should also have office plants like ivy, pothos, peace lily. All are very good for detoxifying chemicals like formaldehyde and other solvents.
Nice.
You need to be aware of what's being used around your office. You need to develop demand a material safety data sheet. which informs you of any chemicals that may be, and you're entitled to this legally when you work for someone. You need to know that. And then uh, if there's a toxic chemical, you need to find different ways to replace it. Some of the most common exposures are from cleaning crews that come in at night.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, it's very important that you or your office manager talk to the cleaning crew and get them to use safer cleaning products.
For them
Because,
too.
oh yeah, for them too. We just worked with a school in Cancer Alley with Ecos, the green cleaning company, and they're donating green cleaning products to this school. We also donated 32 high efficiency particulate air filters to the school because they're right next to a neoprene plant. So they
Wow.
needed to stay healthy. These kids need this stuff. There's a lawsuit against the plant, but we're talking about legal versus what you need to do now. That lawsuit's going to take years, if not
Yeah.
decades.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot you can do in your work. However, I also want to be really clear. If you're in a really toxic job, like working at that neoprene plant, or you're working in an oil refinery, you're going to wear all that protective gear, but you will still be impacted. There are some jobs that are just so dangerous. If you can switch and you want, it would be better when you're having kids. It would be
Yeah.
better.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for this information. I don't know, in a lot of ways it feels kind of grim, but I think when you're armed with the knowledge that you have put into this book and that you continue to put out into the world, I feel like at least there's that, that's the glimmer of hope that we're all grabbing onto, that we can then expand upon. And, without people like you doing this work and fighting the good fight, none of this would be even in our field of awareness the way that it is. So thank you. I do want to give you the chance, we're out of time here, but if there were one final message that you would want to leave with the listener today about the book, about your work, about anything you feel called to share, what would that be?
Today, right now, is the time to start. Your body is an incredibly responsive organism. And if you start putting good foods into your body using healthy cleaning products and cosmetics, your body will respond. If you do the same for your kids, they will respond. And it's a tough world out there for all of us, but raising healthy kids will make you a black belt. You will be able to protect your family and yourself when it comes to chemical toxins. I truly believe that. And I truly believe that the time to start is now for you to make a difference in your life. And making a difference in your life this way, as I've shown, will make a difference in our national life too, in everyone's life. You are important and your choices matter because your choices are my choices. We're all these little ripples and we
Yeah.
are making changes. We really are.
Beautifully said. David, the book is, as you know, Raising Healthy Kids, Protecting Your Children from Hidden Chemical Toxins. Where can our listeners find out more about you and get the book?
Well, raisinghealthykidsthebook.com has all of my has all of our stories and reporting from Cancer Alley and my social media. The book, I hope you go to your local independent bookseller and buy it from them, but it's also available at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart, Target, and many other outlets.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, David. This was a real pleasure.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you.